guys, so it's time for my monthly reading wrap up, this being the end of January, the beginning of February, and I have quite a few things to talk about in this video. I actually read quite a lot of individual things according to Goodreads, but I would not consider most of them to be very long. There's sort of graphic novels, like little short things here and there, so I don't feel like I read a ton word-wise, but like I said, there's quite a few things to talk about, so I will get on and show you them. Let's start with probably the shortest, shall we? And that is Tales Told in Oz by Gregory Maguire. This is a little chap book, which I got from Madras Press, and I'll link that down below. Gregory Maguire being the author of Wicked, and this is sort of pre-Wicked. This is a collection of short little fairy tale-esque books that are supposed to be the kind of folk tales and fairy tales of Oz. So before Oz truly existed, the kind of stories that presumably parents in Oz would tell their children, that kind of thing. I really enjoyed this. I've read no other Gregory Maguire. I've never read Wicked or any of the sequels. I hear that the sequels are not very popular at all, although obviously Wicked is, and had always kind of wanted to read Wicked because I know it's Lena over at Just Kiss My Frog's favourite book. And I trust her, so I really do want to check it out, and after reading this has really given me the push to actually go ahead and read Wicked, so I think I'm going to download it on my Kindle and give that a shot. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and Lena, I'm going to send this to you in the post because you need to read it too. I then read Asterix and the Missing Scroll. This is the latest in the Asterix graphic novel series, which have been going for quite some time now. They're originally written in French, and this is obviously an English translation. Well, I do have a few of them in French. My French is pretty mediocre, but Asterix helps me. So Asterix is a little Gaul who lives in a Gaulish village, the only Gaulish village to not have succumbed to the power of the Roman Empire, obviously completely fictional. And perhaps Roman Empire is the wrong word because it is during the reign of Julius Caesar, who isn't actually really considered the beginning of the Roman Empire. It's actually his adopted son and nephew, is it? Octavian, who becomes Augustus, that's actually the first emperor. Anyway, doesn't matter, this book's awesome. It's one of my favourite of the most recent ones. They took a break from Asterix and then they came back. They had some different people involved, some of the original creators went away, but this one reunites the original creators, Goscinny and Uderzo. Brilliant. Glad they're back together, loved this. I then have a book that I only really read a few pages of this month because it was brought over from December, and that is Silma Hill by Ian Maloney. Now this is set almost 100 years after the original witch hunts and witch trials were really popular, but it's set in a small rural village in Scotland where public opinion and pressure has kind of brought this back into society, and some strange things have been going on in the village, and the local reverend's daughter is accused of witchcraft. I enjoyed this book. I will say, however, that it is not a particularly surprising book. I think after the initial setup, everything that happened for me was reasonably predictable. I kind of saw where the story was going and what was going to happen and how it was going to end, and that is how it worked out. But it is still an enjoyable book. Some books don't really need to be surprising and shocking, I guess. So it was still good fun. I haven't actually read a lot of books set during the witch trials other than The Crucible. And I keep wanting to say, if you enjoy The Crucible, you'll probably enjoy this. But maybe that's just because they're the only 2 witch trial books I've read. But I did enjoy them, both in a similar way. So I would recommend this if you enjoyed that. And although it kind of ended the way I expected it to end, I still cared about how it ended. I then have a little collection of poetry, which I picked up in a second-hand shop for £1.50. And didn't haul it because I'm not going to keep it. I'm going to give it to my friend because I think she'll like it. But I read it in about 15 minutes on the train. And that is The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy and Other Stories by Tim Burton. The reason I'm going to give this away is because I'm never going to reread it. It was good fun, but nothing crazy special. So this is Tim Burton, the director and screenwriter, etc, etc. And this is a collection of basically nonsense poetry for adults. So it's quite dark themes, quite gruesome things happen in it. It's kind of like if Roald Dahl wrote poetry, and it's nonsense poetry. It kind of reminds me of the nonsense poetry of Edward Lear in the same style but on very different subjects. It also includes strange little illustrations which might indicate to you kind of the gruesome aspect of the poems. We have a little boy here with nails in his eyes. Weird, fun, but like nothing crazy special. One book that is particularly special though is a book that I gave 5 stars this month, and that is Cassandra Parkin's New World fairy tales. I have filmed a complete review of this, so I'll link that down below. But this is a collection of short stories written by Cassandra Parkin, all retelling traditional fairy tales in a modern setting, sometimes with aspects of magic realism, but most of the time quite realistic, or at least presented in a fashion that these things could really happen. He tells stories like Snow White, Cinderella. It really turns them around and uses them to comment on modern issues and tell fairy tales, but also very important stories. It's kind of like, I feel like fairy tales are somewhat didactic and they teach you things, and this kind of does this, but for the modern world and for adults. Wonderful, so wonderful. Cassandra Parkin's writing is stunning, and I have to read more by her because I adored this. So thank you, Jen, for sending me this for Christmas. We then have Our Endless Numbered Days by Claire Fuller. This is a very harrowing read. It's about a young girl called Peggy, whose father is a survivalist, basically somebody that believes the apocalypse is going to happen soon and is preparing for it. It's about Peggy and her father going missing, and Peggy then returning. So Peggy returns home after quite a few years without her father, but that's early on in the book. The book flashes backwards and forwards between the time leading up to them disappearing and what happens whilst they're gone to the here and now, where Peggy is back at home with her mother, kind of recovering from the events that took place while she was missing. Like I said, incredibly harrowing, very moving, very beautifully written. My only complaint, and this is something that is going to depend perhaps on your sensibilities, or it's just something that I feel like Claire Fuller will probably develop as she writes more. This is her first novel, and that is that I found the middle very slow. I found the middle to be too long. If it was me, I would have cut 50 pages. I would say the 50 pages that I would cut are still beautiful and are gorgeous, but unnecessary, and for me, I feel like it almost risked me losing my engagement with the plot. Thankfully, I did get re-engaged with the plot and really enjoyed it. Glad I got to the end, really glad I read it, and I will be reading more of Claire Fuller's work in the future, but I do think the middle was unnecessarily long. There's only one book I truly hated this month though, and that is Hubert by Ben German, I think, sorry, Geijsemans. Sorry. I didn't like this book at all, and I am more than happy to tell you guys this because I found it incredibly problematic. So the art in this graphic novel is gorgeous. I do think his style is beautiful. There's a very limited kind of dusky colour palette. It's very artistic for a graphic novel, which fits in the fact that a lot of it concentrates on art in art galleries and this man's admiration of pieces of classic art. But oh my god, did I have a problem with this book. So this is about a lonely Belgian man who goes to the art gallery every weekend to look at pictures. He will take a note of what that picture is so he can go home, look it up and paint it himself. So he likes to paint, and that's very sad. Like, it's very sympathetic that this man is very lonely. He's very reserved and doesn't really know how to communicate with people and make friends. However, that does not excuse the actions of his character in this book, and the book is very much portrayed as if you're meant to find him endearing and sympathetic and feel bad for him. However, this man also likes to look at a young woman through his window, not naked, but while she's doing things in her kitchen, who he doesn't know, so he will stare at her through his window, and obviously has kind of created an image in his head of her being some sort of ideal or somebody he wants to know, purely based on her appearance and observing her, not really knowing her, and then also takes a picture of her, at least one, there's one in the book, takes a picture of her, and then at the end it implies that he is about to use that picture to paint her, which is completely unacceptable. Like, somebody has not consented to you taking their picture, or and there's also a point where she sees him and it is clear she's uncomfortable about him looking at her through his window. That is not acceptable, and it is not excused by the fact that he is lonely. There's a massive difference between something like that and people painting pictures of YouTubers or people that have already put their face out there. This young woman, like I said, has absolutely no consent or say in this man's private use of her photograph from her in her home, where she's supposed to be in her private life. So honestly, I hated it. I don't think it's okay. And I know that might sound like a small thing to you, but including small things like that in books like this is how we continue to let things like this seem like they're acceptable. So I'm getting rid of this. Moving swiftly on to a far, far better graphic novel, and that is Take It As a Compliment by Maria Stoyan. 5 out of 5 stars. This book is 20 chapters, and each chapter is a small graphic novel depiction of individuals' testimonies of sexual harassment and sexual abuse. It includes men and women. It's such a wonderful way to depict kind of everyday sexism and stuff that happens so commonly to people all over the world. Things that people are scared to talk about or embarrassed to confess to, or that they feel is their own fault, and kind of the guilt and what's associated with those experiences because of the society we live in that has a tendency to victim blame. This book is wonderful. Obviously, it's not perhaps for everybody. It could be triggering, and if you're worried about that, then perhaps this isn't the one for you, especially since these are visual depictions. It obviously does not graphically show sex scenes or anything like that. It does things quite creatively, but it is very moving and also just gorgeously drawn. So it uses a variety of different art styles by the author. For example, this, and this, and this, and this. Like I said, big variety, absolutely beautiful. I think the artist's work somewhere in between Marjane Satrapi and Isabel Greenberg, and I will have to pick up anything else she publishes. From what I can tell, this is the only one of her books out. I think it only just came out this year or late last year. If you don't think this book will trigger past experiences for you, I would recommend it to everyone. 5 out of 5 stars. On that note, another book. I have obviously, for some reason, these two books were quite similar. I ended up reading both of them this month, and that is Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates. I actually listened to this on audiobook, so I'll insert a picture here. This book was the best book I've read in a long time. Honestly, absolutely adored it. I cried. There was multiple times where my eyes teared up on public transport whilst I was listening to it, and there were actual moments where I did physically cry. It's so moving. It stems from an online project where people can share their experiences of everyday sexism, all the way from wolf whistling and catcalling in the street to rape threats to actual physical assault. I would recommend everybody read it. Again, another one that could be quite triggering. Yes, I'm using trigger warnings for potential rape victims that don't want to read about other people being raped. I don't know why people have a problem with that, but there we go. Yes, it could be triggering, but I do think, where possible, everybody should do this. Man or woman, whatever gender you identify as, this book is so important. And even if, like me, you're somebody that appreciates we still live in a very sexist society and considers himself a feminist, it's still worth reading because there's something about seeing it all put there in one place. These testimonies from women, the statistics, the discussion of why these things are so common, prevalent and acceptable is harrowing and soul destroying, but also inspiring and makes you want to really make a difference. And also to not let people get away with treating you like that in everyday society. I'm going to film a whole video about it, so I won't say any more here, but like I said, 5 out of 5 stars, absolutely loved it. I then reread a book, and that is Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. I decided to listen to this on audiobook because I was really just feeling in the mood for it. It's one of my all-time favourite books. It's comic fantasy set in Ankh-Morpork, which is the capital of the Discworld. The Discworld being the world that Terry Pratchett set a massive series in. The Going Postal is the first of a series within the Discworld though, so you can start with this one and I'd highly recommend it. It's about Moise van Litvig, who is a ex-crook and is kind of charged with rebuilding the post office, which has gone into disrepair. I love it. I am planning on listening to Making Money, the sequel, soon because I really just want to reread the series. I listened to an audio narration though I haven't listened to before. I do really like the Tony Robinson narration, but it is abridged. I've read the book, so I have read the whole thing, and I never minded listening to the Tony Robinson version because it was so well acted and narrated and still a lot of fun that it didn't matter that it was abridged. But I really wanted to listen to the unabridged version, so I downloaded it from Audible and also really enjoyed it. The narrator may not be Tony Robinson, but he still does an excellent job, and I would still really recommend it if you want to listen to the unabridged version. Still 5 out of 5 stars. It makes me laugh anew every single time I read or listen to it. Yeah, if I could give it 6 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, I would. And last but not least, I have another non-fiction book, and that is The Great Inscription of the Law Code of Gorton. This is a tiny, tiny little book, kind of produced for mass consumption by anybody. It's not aimed at experts or scholars, it's for everybody, but it's also very factual and interesting and useful. So Gorton is a city in Crete. I don't know a lot about Gorton, I've never studied it in depth, but I know that they have a very well preserved law code and are just a very interesting city. I do find Crete very interesting in terms of ancient Greek history. So I wanted to learn more, and there's this massive great inscription which is preserved in Gorton that details a lot of the private law of inheritance and adoption and things like that. So this book essentially includes a translation of that, which is pages long. It's a massive inscription. I'd really love to go and see it. But also includes like a few introductory chapters which are quite interesting about the history of Gorton, the archaeology of Gorton, and just some general detail on ancient law and antiquity. So really fun. I zoomed through this and really actually enjoyed it. I think it's presented in a really good fashion. Again, like I said, tiny, but yeah, I really enjoyed it and I'm really glad I've read it. And although there's so much more I want to know and so much more I want to think about, I think it's been a really good starter for me on reading about the Law Code of Gorton and has inspired me to download more journal articles, more in-depth and more scholarly, to read about Gorton. Anyway, those are all of the books that I read this month. Let me know if you have any thoughts on any of them. I'd love to discuss them, especially as quite a lot of them inspired quite extreme reactions in me, good or bad. So we'd love to chat about them. But until next time guys, happy reading and I'll see you again soon. Bye!